out for what the club website has phrased as the time being. But he suffered a groin strain and actually was forced off the field after just 5 minutes on the pitch, having come on as a substitute himself. He was then replaced. But if it's a strain, then it's not a tear, and that's always a good sign. The question is whether he'll be back before the end of the year. May be questionable. Bayern may not feel the need to rush someone like Serge Gnabry back. But they will have a point to prove against Manchester United in the Champions League at Old Trafford. Harry Kane in particular suffered his first defeat as a Bayern starter yesterday against Eintracht Frankfurt. That tells you how well he's had it since moving to the German record title holders. Of course, the defeats to Leipzig, he was on the bench in the Super Cup, and he was kept on the bench in the DFB Pokal defeat to Saarbrücken as well. Husseini Ahmad writing in saying, let's have Coman on the left wing and Sane on the right wing. They are more unstoppable like that, Mia San Mia. I like the comment as well, Husseini, and it's a fair comment as well. We saw them switch positions for the second half yesterday, and it certainly made a bigger impact on the game, and really was the way they started the season as well, and you were getting the best out of both players, Leroy Sané and Kingsley Coman. Harry Kane in particular was linking up very well with both of them. Him and Leroy Sané in particular have struck up a wonderful partnership. If you look at them in all competitions, Harry Kane has set up 4 goals for Leroy Sané, and Leroy Sané has set up 4 goals for Harry Kane. It's not a bad combination. But I like the thought, Husseini, about switching them back from kickoff. I'll be honest, all the comments about Tuchel out are the ones that we're talking about. They're just not necessary. There is no need to be calling for Thomas Tuchel to lose his job. Bayern have had a bad performance, but they had bad performances occasionally under Julian Nagelsmann. They had bad performances occasionally under Hansi Flick, under Niko Kovac, under Pep Guardiola, Carlo Ancelotti even. These things happen over the course of a season. Bayern know that. And the message out of the Bayern camp really is the right one. It's all about the reaction now. Bayern have to show a reaction to what was comfortably, and they'll admit it themselves, their worst performance of the season in many regards. Nice to hear that people are tuning in from places as far-fetched as Cambodia. And it is funny as well, because we talk often about how difficult Bayern are to beat on any given day in the Bundesliga, or in any competition, to be honest, as Matisse Tell showing us some fleet footwork there. But so many different things have to come together for an opponent to beat Bayern. And yesterday, pretty much all of those boxes were ticked by Frankfurt. We also talk about goalkeepers needing to have great performances against Bayern. Mistakes can't be made by opponents. They need to show intensity. They need to run more. They need to get stuck into the challenges. And Frankfurt did all of those things yesterday, albeit Kevin Trapp didn't really have to produce one of his better performances this season, because Frankfurt as a unit, as a team, as a collective, really stifled Bayern at times. There were chances, but Bayern couldn't find the same clinical touch up front that Frankfurt did, and really was quite remarkable. Frankfurt scoring 5 goals from 6 shots on target. And that is the ruthless efficiency, another box that they had to tick to beat Bayern, and did. Got people tuning in from Ghana. We've got Namibia. Comments coming in as well, so keep them coming as well, because I like to read them. Sika talks a lot. There's one comment saying, I'm from Ghana and a very die-hard fan of Bayern Munich. Said that yesterday we didn't try at all, and we need new midfielders. Now, I would debate the fact that Bayern didn't try at all, but they certainly didn't look at their best. I think you could tell that they really did try to get back into that game, but Frankfurt did a remarkable job of taking the wind out of Bayern's sails when they tried to generate it either side of half-time. And I think that really was the difference, especially when you consider the Deutsche Bank Park. It's not an easy stadium to go to. It's one of the more intimidating atmospheres in German football. And if you ever get a chance to experience it, highly recommended. But I think Bayern's players did try, but it was really interesting as well because, of course, after the game against Union Berlin got postponed, that game will now take place on the 24th of January, having been snowed off last weekend. But before that game got postponed, Thomas Tuchel was talking about how exhausted his players were, physically, mentally, emotionally. And you just wondered whether that extra couple of days of respite and rest actually would have done them really good, and whether it would benefit them. And then you were listening to Thomas Tuchel's pre-match press conference before the game yesterday, and he was questioning whether it would be an advantage. Instead of focusing on the fact that his players had rested and recuperated, it was really a case of, have they stayed sharp over those 10 days? Are they still in game mode the same way they were in the games against Köln and Copenhagen, where, let's be honest, they maybe weren't at their best in those games either. A 1-0 win against Köln, Harry Kane scoring the only goal of that game. It was the first game since Louis van Gaal was in charge in 2010 that Bayern didn't make a single substitute. And Tuchel talked about being in control of a tight game, didn't want to disturb the rhythm. Kane said the result may not look great, but it really was a case of job done. The Copenhagen draw was disappointing, but Copenhagen were fighting for their lives in Group A in the Champions League. And it was a night of sub-zero temperatures where no one really warmed up enough. And it ended Bayern's record of 17 straight wins in the group stages of the Champions League. But they are still unbeaten in 39, which is another ongoing record in Europe's Premier Club competition. So that's one they'll still be looking to defend, even if they did drop points against Copenhagen. Manuel Neuer described that game as being a bit like stirring cement in terms of how difficult it was. But then they had this rare respite, and the Union game got postponed. They came back against Frankfurt, and you could tell that Frankfurt were still in game mode. They were still sharp, and it took Bayern time to get into the game. And the problem was, by the time they got into the game, they were already a couple of goals behind because Frankfurt had come storming out of the blocks with great intensity and incredible amount of aggression. And Thomas Müller, the man on your screen now, admitted that Bayern didn't really do enough to withstand it. And so there were reasons for the defeat. They will accept. Frankfurt. Saki saying, I pray my Bayern come back massively. I don't think there's any doubt of that. I think we will see a reaction. If anything, well, Manchester United didn't exactly have a great result on the weekend either. They lost 3-0 to Bournemouth yesterday in Old Trafford. Got absolutely played off the park. But we've seen so often in the past with Bayern, when you beat them in the manner that Frankfurt did, which doesn't happen very often, let's be honest, but it does happen sometimes. But given the manner of defeat, Manchester United need to be very wary of the fact that they might be on the receiving end of a very, I wouldn't say angry Bayern side, but a Bayern team that really have a point to prove and will want to make amends for the defeat. Because they'll know that they deserve to lose as well, even if they had good moments in the game. Darboe says, good morning from Gambia. Bayern will lose by individual mistakes. 4 mistakes, 4 goals. Just thinking back now on the first 4 goals for Eintracht Frankfurt, and I can see where you're coming from. The defending for the first wasn't quite up to scratch as the ball ping-ponged around in the box. Difficulty was, it was a bit scrappy in the end, and you could say the same for the second, because I'll be honest, I don't think Davies and Upamecano can do much more to stop Dina Mbimbe for the second goal, given the fact that he bundled his way into the area, and then the finest of margins saw him just squeak out a shot under Manuel Neuer. And I almost think, if if you watch the replays of that situation, if Davies and Upamecano do more, they actually risk conceding a penalty anyway, because they really couldn't get a touch on Mbimbe at that point, given the fact that he was bursting towards the 6-yard box. Shouts for Harry Kane, who's a popular man, as is to be expected, because they haven't had many chances, the Bayern fans, since he's arrived at the club, to get up close and personal with him in situations like this, Harry Kane. Saki saying, I'm in Ghana, but my heart is for Germany and Bayern in... Unbelievably. Nice to hear from you, Saki. Thank you for your support. We do relish the fact that Bayern have a global fan base. You can see the rondos going on now with the players that were, most of them, on the bench yesterday. Avoid the nutmegs. That's always what I think is the most important thing here, because that tends to be the moment that you get mocked so mercilessly sometimes as a Bayern player. Thomas Muller, I can tell you, won't let you get away with much in a rondo like this. Mistakes, complacency, not acceptable. There you can see Bernie and the boys taking the photos, signing the autographs. Leon Goretzka made an appearance on German television after yesterday's game. And he, like Thomas Muller, did underline the fact that there are lots of reasons that you could point to as to why Bayern suffered the defeat that they did yesterday. Said losing 5-1 was a very humbling experience, but did underline the fact that games like that simply shouldn't happen at FC Bayern. Those are the standards that they set themselves here in Munich, and they expect much better of themselves. Normally they are the team playing other teams off the park, and not the other way around. But as I say, they are human after all. There is an anomaly in the system every now and again. Thomas Tuchel's charges are not exempt from that, and it has been a tough first half of the season for Bayern as well, given the amount of fixtures, the amount of injuries that they've suffered to a variety of players at a variety of stages of the season so far. There has, in the squad at least, been a lack of consistency simply based on the options available. Rarely have we seen Thomas Tuchel name unchanged lineups. But Leon Goretzka talking about the upcoming games against Manchester United and Stuttgart. He said that's the beauty of football, things go quickly. He said for us on Tuesday it's about showing a reaction, showing that our focus is now on righting the wrongs and ultimately showing a different face against Manchester United to gain a bit of self-confidence, because back-to-back games without a win are the types of dips in form that Bayern like to avoid, and I put dips in form there almost in quotation marks, given the fact that 2 games without a win for any other team in German football would not be seen as a dip in form, but those the types of analysis that we get used to with Bayern, and they have such high standards for themselves. Thomas Tuchel has certainly bought into that mentality since joining the club. But the defeat to Frankfurt, his 7th since taking charge as head coach. Seventh defeat in 33 matches for the former Chelsea, PSG, Dortmund and Mainz head coach. talked a lot about fast and fluid football, his desire to see his players execute that out on the pitch this season. At the same time, I think it's fair to say there's still an element of them acclimatizing to life under Thomas Tuchel. He was happy to actually have the extra few days last week after the Union game was postponed to work with his team. Felt that they had a really good week in training. It just didn't show out on the pitch. And there were times at the end of last season that Tuchel was making that point, that what he was seeing on the training pitch didn't then translate across to the 90 minutes of action. Remember Julian Nagelsmann making similar statements as well. But nevertheless, you would back Bayern to bounce back quickly. And as I say, I do think it's bad news for Manchester United, actually, that Bayern have suffered this defeat against Eintracht Frankfurt before their game, because for Manchester United, it's a must-win match. They are in dire straits in the UEFA Champions League. Bayern have topped the group. They topped it with 2 games to spare, Group A. 13 points from a possible 15. Copenhagen, the only team to take points off of them in that 0-0 draw at the Allianz Arena a few weeks ago. Manchester United currently bottom of the group on 4 points. Copenhagen and Galatasaray have 5 apiece. And so if Manchester United want to qualify for the knockout stages of the Champions League, they definitely need to win. If they want to potentially even qualify for the Europa League, it's a must-win situation as well, and they have to hope that Copenhagen or Galatasaray emerge victorious. From the other fixture, but precarious situation for Erik ten Hag's men, and Bayern are not the type of team to show mercy in those moments either. Kim Sloth saying, or Slurt, hoping I pronounced that right. Apologies if I didn't, but saying we win together, we lose together, we fight together no matter what, Mia-san Mia. That is exactly the type of comment we like to see in the chat here for this live training session, because that is what it is all about, through thick and thin. And let's be honest, with Bayern, there's a lot more thin than thick as well. There's a lot to love about this club. Felix Jonah saying, I'm Felix from Ghana, but I really love this club, Bayern Munich. We will surely bounce back from the mess at Frankfurt. That's a good way to describe it. It was a bit messy. Jules getting in touch from Malta as well. Bayern fan with it. That is what it is all about. Sometimes football can be a funny old game, though. And yesterday did feel like one of those days where you were watching Frankfurt produce this near-perfect performance where everything turned to gold. And don't get me wrong, in the past there have been several games where Bayern have had that go their way. Everything go right for them. They have the golden touch in front of goal. And today was, or excuse me, yesterday was just Frankfurt's day in that regard. And that is going to happen. Sometimes you can't explain these things because they were on a run of 4 games without a win, a really tough run of form, and they just turned it on against the German record title holders. We see teams do that a lot. Doesn't always result in such a big win. See there, Michael Rechner, the goalkeeping coach, working quite intensely with Daniel Peretz there about the shape of his body when closing down an oncoming player, perhaps, in terms of where there's space for the ball to be put, how he needs to be thinking about how to position his body. Interesting to see that discussion there, actually. Meanwhile, it's quite an intense rondo still going on that's gotten bigger a little bit. As we'll see the players in the starting lineup yesterday doing their rounds. Got to get all the angles right with the cameras. Can't miss the opportunity. They're not hanging around forever, but goodness me, is that someone that has had their forehead signed? I've just spotted that in the crowd. I will have to go back to that. I have to keep an eye out for that. I think someone's got an autograph on their forehead. It's a young girl. Now, on first glance, I thought I saw an 8 in the mix. And if it is an 8, then that means it was Leon Goretzka that did it. You got to think the players may have been told maybe not to do things like that. But right now, Thomas Tuchel has picked up a bit of a knock. Just moving not quite as freely as he maybe would have wanted to, just to work it out. Got to think as well, any knock to an ankle, to a knee, just feels that little bit worse on a cold day like today. The temperature's not below 0 anymore in Munich. Actually, yesterday we had quite a lot of rain in the city. So you see Tell and Kretzig there with the little handshake afterwards. Kretzig just acknowledging the fact that he caught him a little bit late. But nevertheless, any knock to a joint can feel that little bit worse on a day like today for players like Thomas Tuchel. Actually I'm trying to spot the fans that I talked to. And that might actually be one of them in the cream and beige jacket there holding the football. Nevertheless, I'm still trying to spot the girl. There she is, actually, on the left of your screen with the signature on her forehead. Oh, I want to get to the bottom of this. I'd love to actually go down to the side of the pitch and meet her now, just to ask the question of who it was and what the thinking is. But she has definitely had her forehead signed, ladies and gentlemen. Not recommended to those watching at home, admittedly, but yeah, maybe this is a rare opportunity to come to the Bayern training pitch here at Säbener Straße. She has certainly capitalized on that opportunity. It does look like an 8, right? Underneath the signature, it looks like an 8. And if it's an 8, then that's Leon Goretzka. Gotta love it. That's the type of ardent commitment and support we like to see here in Munich. So people are still getting in touch in the Facebook chat as well, so thank you for all your comments. If you've got any questions as well, feel free to fire away. I'm happy to answer any that I can. And if I can't, I'll explain why. Paul saying fans in good times and bad times, Mia San Mia. Exactly, Paul. Fonzie saying Mia San Mia from Ghana. David getting in touch from Kenya. Feel free to let me know where in the world you're tuning in from. Feel free to let me know who your favorite Bayern player is and why. Feel free to shoot me a scoreline prediction if you want for the game against Manchester United. We can talk about our pre-match predictions for that game as well. As I've said, I think we will see a big reaction from Bayern, and Manchester United need to be wary of the fact that Bayern are maybe going to come at them in a no-holds-barred manner. But those are the types of things that you're more than welcome to get in touch with. But any questions as well, I really do welcome them. We've had plenty of discussions on the status of people like Thomas Müller, whether he is an all-time great or the greatest of all time for Bayern. We've talked about Jamal Musiala, his role for the club. Either way, I thank you for tuning in. Hope you're having a good weekend so far in spite of the result, and ultimately hope that you have a good rest of the weekend as well, wherever you are in the world. Just a brief respite for the players that have been intensely working on the rondo. The whistle goes, though, from Thomas Tuchel, and back underway. The masked man, Thomas Tuchel, today. Fair to say, all turned up for a recent training session. Looking like ninjas, the Bayern players. That was before their game against Copenhagen in those sub-zero temperatures. Made it impossible to work out who was who, actually, on that occasion today. A few more faces to spot, which is nice. And Nana Opoku saying hello from Ghana. William Alex saying he's watching from Ghana as well. Fonzie saying Jamal Musiala is my favourite. Had to name my son after him. Well, we just saw a woman with a signature on her forehead. You've named your son after Jamal Musiala, but great name and a great source of inspiration in that regard, because he's going to have a very, very bright future ahead of him, Jamal Musiala, as long as he can avoid these injury issues that keep creeping up. It is a bit of a concern. It's always the hamstrings, and given the way he operates on the pitch, that fast twitch movement, there is concern as to whether that might be something that follows him throughout his career. But what a career he's had so far. At a tender age of 20, he missed out on winning the Golden Boy Award to his former England youth international teammate Jude Bellingham, who has left Dortmund, gone to Real Madrid, and just taken the footballing world by storm. I think anyone that had watched him play in Germany knew he was capable of taking the world by storm. I think it's the people that are surprised that clearly weren't the ones paying attention to what he was doing on the books with Borussia Dortmund. Nevertheless, Jamal Musiala, his match-winning heroics, his title-winning heroics on the final day of last season weren't quite enough to earn him the award. He did finish second in that regard, though, and nodded his cap to Jude Bellingham. I think when you watch someone like Jamal Musiala play football, there is just a joy in the way he plays. There is a purity in the essence. Is that street footballer that can just get your heart fluttering when he weaves his way through a few players. Yozu saying he's watching from Lebanon. All the love. Well, love back to everyone as well. Barrere highlighting Kimmich, Davies, Musiala, Kane, Minje, Muller, Neuer as his... That's almost the whole starting lineup from yesterday, Barrere. But you know what? When you're a Bayern fan, you're allowed to have more than one favourite. That's the beauty of football. There's so much to enjoy about the unique qualities of every player, both as a footballer and as a personality off the pitch as well. Corbyn asking whether I'm allowed to interview Tuchel. Unfortunately not. I don't quite have that power. I am here at Zebenerstrasse, but fortunately I'm tucked away in a nice warm booth as opposed to having to be out there in the colder climates. So unfortunately not able to stretch a mic out and ask Thomas Tuchel a question on this one. Although, Corbyn, I have to ask, I'd be intrigued to know, what would you want to ask Thomas Tuchel? What's the question you would want me to ask him? Because there might be a chance further down the line for me to do so. And if I get the chance, I'll happily ask it. It's a very intriguing person, Thomas Tuchel, to meet. Very intelligent, very authentic. Doesn't mince his words. And have had the chance to interview him at my work in German football. Certainly gave some of the most intelligent answers I've ever heard. Made me raise my game as well in terms of the questions I was asking him. I had to make them more cerebral as well, actually. But I'm sure he'll have had several ideas of how to turn things around for his side after that defeat yesterday to Eintracht Frankfurt. But Tuchel has always said, actually, that the title race in the Bundesliga is ultimately a fight for Bayern against themselves and against their own expectations. The aim for every player, for every head coach that's ever really come through the ranks at Bayern is the one that Tuchel underlined. He said the mindset is of win, 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 never ending. Every game, the same mindset. Go into the game expecting victory, but prepared to secure victory as well. Oh, what a save. Sven Ulreich. Oh. Good to hear that the fans were watching, actually, and that they reacted accordingly. You can see here lots of work being done in tight spaces. This is the type of exercise that will work players when it comes to playing against a deep-lying block. Jamal Musiala, one of the more inventive players, one of the ones that has tricks up his sleeve to unlock a back line. I think the frustrating thing for Bayern yesterday is they did unlock the Frankfurt back line on occasion. The problem is when they didn't find the clinical touches. Harry Kane in particular had a glorious opportunity in the first half that, I'll be honest, Tyler was commentating and I was already celebrating before the shot went wide of the post. Tyler being my co-commentator on the web radio service. We hope you join us for coverage of those games because we do have a lot of fun with it, ladies and gents. We hope you have fun listening in as well. Life you can take yourselves too seriously at times, but when it comes to football, never lose sight of the entertainment factor. And if we're being honest, Eintracht Frankfurt produced some very entertaining football yesterday, and it was exactly the game plan they needed to beat Bayern, and they produced it and then executed it to perfection as well. And that point can't be stressed enough because they had to be perfect. And even still, Bayern scored. Joshua Kimmich with arguably the best goal of the afternoon. Unfortunately, nothing more than a consolation effort. Corwin's got in touch about what he'd ask Thomas Tuchel. He says, looking back, what aspects of the game do you think could have been done better? And are there specific areas that you believe need improvement to avoid similar outcomes in future matches? Interesting. I will happily, if I get the chance, ask him that, Corbyn. And I think he gave some indications in the answers that he gave yesterday. He referenced the lack of activity. He referenced the individual mistakes as well. He said conceding 5 goals without making mistakes is not possible. That happened today and they were severely punished. And the problem was, he did underline the fact that the performance simply wasn't enough. But yes, I guess I understand what you mean, Corbyn. What does not enough mean specifically? I just think they lacked a clinical touch in the final third. They weren't as incisive and as sharp as Frankfurt were. And I think one of the better statements from Tuchel maybe gives the big indication where he said he felt his team underestimated the danger levels. And I think Frankfurt really took advantage of that, especially in the opening exchanges, because they came herring out of the block. They put Bayern on the back foot and they got their just rewards with 2 early goals. And Bayern are an incredible team that are more than capable of coming from 2 goals behind. The problem was Frankfurt never, and this is the mistake that other teams have sometimes made against Bayern in the past, Frankfurt kept the intensity levels up. Other teams will go, oh wow, we've got a 2-0 lead against Bayern. Oh dear, we weren't really expecting this. What do we do now? And they'll sit back and they'll drop deep and they'll defend without having any outlet and any way to alleviate the pressure. Frankfurt did a remarkable job of dropping deep, keeping things tight. At times they had all 10 men behind the ball, if not 9 at least. Lovely goal from Pavlovic there, finding the bottom corner. But what Frankfurt also had, and this is the point I was trying to make, Frankfurt also found ways to alleviate the pressure. Even when they were 2-0 up, they never took their eye off the ball. They constantly remained ambitious, looking for more goals. And you have to give them credit because they were clinicals. 6 shots on target, 5 goals scored. Manuel Neuer making just 1 save, but you can't really point your finger at Manuel Neuer and say, well, you were to blame for any of the goals conceded. It was, in so many ways, an anomaly, and will feel like that. But Bayern also have to make it an anomaly by then winning the next game against Manchester United. And it's not an easy end to 2023. Manchester United, Stuttgart. All eyes will be on them later today when they take on league leaders Bayer Leverkusen. Stuttgart, who have just knocked Borussia Dortmund out of the DFB Pokal as well. They are really flying high. They've had 10 wins this season already in the Bundesliga to sit on 30 points. And considering the fact that they only picked up 33 points in both of the last 2 seasons, really is quite remarkable the way they've turned things around under Sebastian Hoeneß, the former Bayern reserve team head coach. Of course, Stuttgart, if they beat Leverkusen today, they could move above Bayern in the table, though Bayern would, of course, have that game in hand, the postponed match against Union Berlin, who themselves ended their losing streak yesterday. That was quite a turn of events as they climbed out of the bottom 3. Leverkusen right now with a 3-point advantage over Bayern. So they could stretch that to 6 with victory against Stuttgart. But, as I say, knocked out Dortmund in the Cup. Stuttgart are not to be underestimated this season. Harry Kane, a rare game yesterday against Frankfurt where he didn't score a goal. 18 already in the Bundesliga, which is a new Bundesliga record for a player not just in their debut season, but any season. No player had ever scored 18 through 12 or now 13 matches. Breaking the single season record, actually, for an English goal scorer in Germany's top flight, held by Kevin Keegan and Jadon Sancho. They both scored 17 goals apiece. Keegan did it in the 1978-79 season with Hamburg, and Sancho did it in the 2019-20 campaign with Dortmund. But Harry Kane, with just 12 games played, smashed that record. And could even smash the Bundesliga record for most goals scored in a debut season. That is held by the legendary striker Uwe Seeler, best known for being a one-club wonder with Hamburg, and a well-respected Germany international in his time as well. But he scored 30 in his first ever Bundesliga season. That's the record. Klaas-Jan Huntelaar with Schalke scored 29. Edin Dzeko scored 26 when he joined Wolfsburg, and the record in Bayern circles for the most goals scored in a single season for this debut season was set by Luca Toni, who's a pretty prolific goal scorer and a legend in these parts of his own right. 24 goals scored in his first campaign as a Bayern player. And right now, Harry Kane is just 6 goals shy of that. Remarkable, isn't it? Even if he doesn't score in a game against Frankfurt, then there will be maybe a couple of other games where he doesn't score as well. But it's testament to the work he's done and the incredible impact he's made that we're almost surprised that he doesn't score in a game. 18 goals in 13 appearances in the Bundesliga, 22 in 19 in all competitions. Not to mention, as well, because we shouldn't forget it, the 7 assists he's provided too. 4 of those, as I mentioned earlier, for Leroy Sané. Part of a budding partnership between those two players. Jules Clifford getting in touch saying Bayern players need to learn how to cope with pressing. They almost always lose when the opponents press inside their area, and more training is therefore needed in that area. I understand where you're coming from, Jules, because there were a couple of times there where Bayern yesterday against Frankfurt didn't match the Eagles' intensity, and they did get pressed off the ball. Tistel trying to pick out the top corner, unable to do so there. But we've also seen moments where the likes of Joshua Kimmich have made what I will call genuinely uncharacteristic mistakes this season, because Bayern are playing with a more risky approach under Thomas Tuchel. He's demanding that of them as well. He wants them to take more risks. He wants them to be more fast, fluid, and vertical when it comes to their approach play. And so I understand where you're coming from in the fact that we have seen more mistakes maybe than we're used to from some of Bayern's best players this season, and that was the same case against Frankfurt. And so as a result, I'm sure Thomas Tuchel, I have no doubt actually that he'll be addressing those issues, as I'm sure he did earlier in this season as well. But Bayern like to do a lot of intense pressing. And I guess the thing is, it's a game like Galatasaray in the Champions League as well, where they had a bit of problem with the pressing. And that one they did actually kind of master in the end, right? They needed to ride their luck a little bit. They had some few hairy moments at the back. But they ultimately did master it, and they came away with a victory on that occasion. George saying yesterday's performance was unacceptable. We need a reaction in midweek. Tony Cruz saying we will come back stronger. And I think that is ultimately the expectation for this Bayern side. It'll be interesting to see, given the fact that that game against Manchester United doesn't mean anything for Bayern, how they will go about that game. Because in another situation, what you might have seen is Thomas Tuchel giving the likes of Franz Kretzig, Alexander Pavlovic, maybe a run out, not to be disrespectful to the competition that is the Champions League, but given the fact that they don't have the deepest squad Bayern this season, rotation is necessary. And that was a game where Thomas Tuchel maybe had the opportunity to do that, given the fact that Bayern have already secured top spot. They've already got their place in the knockout stages. But really, I think, given the fact that he will now demand a reaction from his side, I don't think we're going to see him make many changes. If anything, we might see the same starting lineup as we saw yesterday. Maybe the exception being Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting. Because I just wonder whether Tuchel will want someone that's a bit more mobile, fleet-footed than Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, who has wonderful qualities in his ability to hold up the ball. That's why Tuchel named him in the starting lineup against Köln in that 1-0 win and against Frankfurt yesterday. It worked out against Köln. It didn't really work out yesterday, admittedly. But Manchester United are a side that when you run at them can prove vulnerable. And I just wonder whether he might therefore just tweak his starting lineup. Maybe Thomas Müller gets a rare start, because it's the type of game where his ability to find space, work between the lines, work the channels might actually be very useful against Manchester United. Then again, if I could get in the head of Thomas Tuchel, I probably would be out on the training page myself as opposed to on the microphone. It's all theory here, but I appreciate the comment from Jules and tapping in really to the same thing that Corbin was asking about as well. Abdul says, let's fight and come back stronger next time. Loving the positivity. We had a lot of Tuchel out at the beginning, and I wasn't a big fan of that. I'm glad to see that those comments are now few and far between. We've actually got some genuine fans here making some proper comments that we can get our teeth stuck into, and ultimately bringing the positivity as well, which there's far too much negativity in the world. And yes, Bayern suffered a 5-1 defeat yesterday to Eintracht Frankfurt, but don't lose sight of the positives. And there have been a lot of them for Bayern this season. Yes, a few setbacks now along the way. And that was the interesting fact that came out of the defeat to Eintracht Frankfurt. It was the last time that Bayern suffered a 5-1 defeat to the Eagles. They actually went on and won the treble back in the 2019-20 campaign. The problem is they can't actually win the treble this time, unfortunately, because they have already been knocked out of the DFB Pokal. Thomas Tuchel, interesting, we haven't actually seen that pose from him. It is his trademark pose, the pondering look of the head coach while he sits on the football. Short-lived today, but nevertheless, it wouldn't be a live training session without seeing Thomas Tuchel sit on a football. Needs a bit of back support though, doesn't he? So he props himself up against the frame of the goal. You gotta love it. 50 years old though, Thomas Tuchel. I'm sure his time in the world of football has maybe shaved a few years off his life as well, given the stress levels he's had with his variety of clubs. I always go back to a comment from Gianluigi Buffon, the legendary Italian goalkeeper, who, when asked about Thomas Tuchel, Said he was extremely intelligent, he's authentic, positive. And he says his ideas in training and when it comes to attacking football, he described as extraordinary. And those are huge words coming from a man of the stature of Gianluigi Buffon. You know, a man who's won everything there is to win pretty much in the world of football. And he had such a high opinion of Thomas Tuchel. It's fair to say there's been lots of positive assessments from the Bayern players since he's arrived as well. Yeah, certainly buying into his idea of football, which is not been such a drastic shift from what Julian Nagelsmann was requesting of them as well, but it has certainly been tweaked in certain areas. Just wondering what training drill they're going to do next, actually, now, the Bayern players. Gone through a bit of short pitch work, which really is about work in tight spaces, both defensively and offensively. The instructions just being given out right now. You can see, I think, still got a good smattering of fans in attendance as well. Definitely broken the 4-figure mark, no doubt about that. Definitely over 1,000. It's whether we have got a couple of thousand in attendance here at Säbener Straße. Church bells ringing in the background as well just a moment ago. Just down the road at Wettersteinplatz. Now we see the drill in action. Franz Ketzig. Well, finding the bottom corner. Tidy finish. But again, it is about that work in tight spaces. Receive the ball, move yourself beyond the marker. Get yourself in a goal-scoring position. The yellow dummy doing the defending as Thomas Tuchel watches on from the base of that post. Tell you as well that while this training session has been going on, sporting director Christoph Freund has been involved in a German television appearance where he's been answering questions as well on yesterday's defeat, talking about the fact that it's a big disappointment, that there's no real clear explanation, but the fact that he pointed out they didn't really bring the energy onto the pitch, the players, despite the fact that they had no game for almost 2 weeks. Also highlighted the fact that the bad start did not make things any easier, but ultimately that for a club like Bayern, there is no defence for a performance like that. And he said that for him it was an attitude problem, not a quality problem. Said he can't take anything away from Frankfurt because they executed their game plan really well. And again, he talks about actually what Thomas Tuchel talked about at half-time, saying that the message at half-time was to get an early goal and make it 3-2. And I tell you what, if they had done that, it could have been such a different game. And they took the risk. Tuchel made 2 changes at half-time. Mazraoui went off, Davies went off, on came Guerrero and Lima. The difficulty was they took a big risk and they were made to be punished for it because early in the second half, Bayern were creating all the pressure, and it invited Guerrero and Lima to push up from the back. And what they were doing was they were playing as inverted wingers. That's not a foreign concept. Oh, excuse me, inverted wingbacks. That's not a foreign concept here at Bayern because Julian Nagelsmann brought it in when he was on the books, especially with Davies, because you would see ultimately when Pavard was playing at right back, he would shift in as another centre-back alongside Upamecano or whoever else was at the heart of defence. It would then allow Davies to really go maraud forward down that left wing, but you wouldn't just see him get chalk on his heels on the wing. He would drift infield as well into that inside left channel. And that was what Lima did from the right yesterday after coming off the bench. And that's what Guerrero did from the left. The problem is they both did it at the same time. Bayern overcommitted, and then they got caught on the counter. And any hopes of them then staging that comeback and building on the lifeline that Joshua Kimmich's goal had given them dissipated, unfortunately. Oh, dear me. Well, it's the type of effort that I'd produce on the training pitch, I'll be honest. So I can't really criticise it too much. Matthias Tell certainly playing with great intensity here in training. Sven Ulreich and Daniel Peretz keeping themselves sharp. Sven Ulreich, of course, who signed a contract extension recently, got lost in amongst the snow chaos, and actually the fact that Neuer signed a contract extension at the same time as him, but both goalkeepers committing their futures to the club for an extra year. It was Manuel Neuer who said he's really been enjoying his work with Sven Ulreich, says that they have built a wall together at the back for Bayern. Manuel Neuer, though, back from that lengthy absence due to the broken leg he suffered almost a year ago. 350 days it took him to make his first appearance following that injury. I'd love to know what's going on in the mind of Thomas Tuchel. That perfectionist mind of his that I'm sure will have had several thoughts when it came to the defeat yesterday. Corbyn saying, I hope one day Bayern plays a match in Austria so that I can go watch. And I feel there was talk at one point recently of Bayern considering a trip down under. The problem is it probably does have to come along with some sort of promotional work, because otherwise it's hard to convince them to take that long trip. We know that they do travel to Asia, as they did this summer. They went to Japan and Indonesia. Because they are aware that they have a global fan base and certainly try to cater to it. A couple of trips to the States in recent years as well. There will be no winter training camp in the Middle East, though, this time around, given the tragic events going on there still. And as a result, I think they'll look to work a little closer to home, Bayern, maybe during the winter break as well. They do have a friendly against Basel lined up, and a game against Hoffenheim as well. Tuchel saying that they will start their mid-season preparations again on January 2nd. And said that maybe they'll have another short training camp after the friendly against Hoffenheim. Just trying to think. I've been chatting away. I'm not sure I've seen Matthias Tell score any of these situations. He's certainly got the intensity. He's certainly trying to put his foot through the ball at all times. There have been some very nice finishes, though, it has to be said, from the players involved in this drill. Mutaz is asking whether Harry and Thomas Müller are around. They were around. And I think Thomas Müller must be around somewhere still, because he was one of the substitutes yesterday, so I'm surprised if he's gone in too early. Maybe he's doing a drill somewhere else on the training pitches right now. But they were out earlier, Mutaz, and ultimately for the players that were in the starting lineup yesterday in that game against Frankfurt, they did some light drills, light aerobic drills, before then spending some time signing autographs, taking photos and doing the rounds with the fans that have showed up here at Säbener Straße. And later today, they will be keeping a very close eye on that game between Leverkusen and Stuttgart, no doubt. So have a big implication for them. Like the big question really surrounding this Bayern side of whether they'll have a chance to take top spot off of Leverkusen before the winter break. And the way it's shaping up, it might not be the case. Of course, the German footballing season broken down into the Hinrunde and the Rückrunde here in Germany, the first half of the season and the second half of the season. Beauty of German football as well is that the fixtures from the first half of the season mirror themselves in the second half of the season. All you do is swap home and away. Trying to hit the cameras, are they? Matisse Tell and Daniel Peretz, I don't know. But clearly having some fun here at Säbener Straße on this, what is now turning actually into a sunny Sunday afternoon here in Munich. Temperature still close to 0, but nice to see that the sun is trying to come out. Sven Ulreich talked about how wonderful it is to work alongside Manuel Neuer upon signing his contract extension. Neuer underlining the fact that he is convinced that he can still achieve some big goals with Bayern in the next few years. Of course, for German players, it's not just club ambitions that are playing their part as well. The ambitions for their country. Germany have the home Euros coming up here in the summer. Manuel Neuer will undoubtedly be part of the Germany squad under Julian Nagelsmann for that tournament. They do want to try and turn the mood around right now surrounding the German national team. It has not been an easy time, or an easy year actually, 2023. And I wonder what Thomas Tuchel will think at the end of the year as well, because at the start of the year, he may not have been expecting to be involved as a football head coach before the end of the year, after seeing his time at Chelsea come to an end. But it all happened quite quickly for him last season, and ultimately now trying to build a bit of a legacy with Bayern. Maybe the type of legacy that Julian Nagelsmann envisioned himself, but never quite managed to fulfill either. And even defeats against Frankfurt won't be setbacks enough. He'll know how to handle adversity and will be looking to get his side back on track. And that's what they'll be looking to do on Tuesday against Manchester United. For now, we're going to leave it here for this live training session from Säbener Straße. An absolute delight to have you involved. Anyone that got in touch in the chat, thank you. Always makes life that little bit easier. But it was wonderful to have you along. James Surrogate, your commentator for this one. But all that's left for me to do is wish you a wonderful rest of the weekend. Mia San Mia.